I'm going to go back maybe later today and then the next couple of days to do Hallel. I want to finish the actual body of the Hagaddah. And there are two of the popular songs that we sing that are well known that I would like to say a few words about. We're on page 86 in the Art School Family Hagaddah. Echad mi yodea. So this is an accounting of the numbers 1 through 13. What do they symbolize? What do they stand for? Now, that's a misleading way to put it because each of these numbers stands for lots of things and maybe an infinity of things. So it means in the context of finishing the Hagaddah, what associations would be relevant or meaningful to take into account for these numbers. And one stands for the creator of the world. In our tradition, especially centered on the Shema, God is one in every way, context, environment, application. There are no ways to attribute multiplicity to the Creator. That's a deep, subtle, philosophical idea, and it's agreed upon across the board. And therefore, the word one here starts with the Creator, which is a natural thing to do. Two is already multiplicity. That's a brand new phenomenon. The Maharal says that the first letter in the Chumash is a beis, because the beginning of the Torah describes the process of creating the world, and creation, that is to say, something other than the Creator, means there's a two, and two is a fundamentally different identity and existence from one being the Creator and only the Creator. Now here, it talks about the two tablets of the covenant. That's very interesting. Why did the Creator give two tablets? Could have done it with one tablet. Moses had to carry both of them down with his two hands. What difference does it make whether it's a crack in the middle or whether it was united? And the commentators point out that the first 5 commandments essentially, though it requires some thought, but essentially govern one's relationship to God, and the second 5 govern one's relationship to other people. There is a difference. The message of 2 tablets held together is that unification as a process is an essential part of the creation. The creation comes in parts, and it's our job to unify them. That means, to a certain sense, the divisions between the parts are artificial. They aren't fundamental. The things are different, but that they are divided, that they are thought of separately, that they have their own identity, is to a certain extent artificial. I would just give you an analogy between 2 violins playing the same music in unison versus a violin and a piano playing a Beethoven violin sonata. You hear the 2 violins playing the same notes in unison, you know very well. If you took away one violin, you'd hear the same thing. A little softer and a little less rich, yes, that's true, but you'd hear the same thing. If you hear a violin playing the violin part of a violin sonata designed to be played with a piano, you definitely get the impression that something's wrong, because part of the time the violinist is standing there saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, counting the rests before he gets to the next position to play. And the piano part alone also has spaces and also has transitions that just don't make sense. There, the incompleteness of each one is built into its identity, and therefore you see right away that each one needs a supplement of something else. Otherwise, what it does is not musically meaningful. So this is the idea that the world is created in separate parts, but the division of the parts, although it does reflect a difference in the nature of each of the parts, but the division into separate parts as if they were separately functioning things is a mistake. And it's our job, one way to describe our job is to put things together in a functional fashion. And of course the Torah's mitzvahs, the rules for operation, are ways in which that is accomplished. Sometimes we understand what we're doing when we do that, and sometimes we don't, but that's a way of describing in total what's going on.
What's our plan of action if the pieces are contextually informed, right? So what makes it make sense is its relation to another thing. So it's kind of hard to learn the part fully and then be able to understand it because it's still lacking because it's go about.
That's 100% correct. You won't understand it fully unless you see its relationship to the other. My analogy is someone who says, I'm going to specialize in the heart. I think the heart is a very important organ. So I've learned all about muscles. I know everything there is to know about muscles, and I've studied the heart muscle, and now I know the heart. Yeah, he knows everything except what makes it beat, which is a nerve impulse. Thank you. And if he doesn't know the nervous system, he can't know how the heart functions. So exactly, because the heart is designed to function in the envelope of a nervous system. If you don't know what the nervous system is and how they're related, you don't really fully understand the heart. I think it's 100% correct.
So what do we do?
This is sort of like what the Rambam writes in the beginning of the guide. When you start learning a subject, each piece that you learn superficially and partially, and you go through until you get a picture of what all the pieces are, and then you start studying their interactions, and as you do that, you get richer and richer understanding of the way it works. There's no hope otherwise, right? If you do physiology and you're not learning fundamental biology or chemistry or physics, there's a lot you don't know about the muscles that you're studying and the blood cells you're studying and the tissue cell, the skin cells you're studying. But you have to start somewhere, and you have to do it piece by piece, and every step you take enriches backwards what you learned before. I think it's true in general in life because things are connected. 3. We have 3 patriarchs and 4 matriarchs. Now, these are the foundations of our nation. As I heard once from a traveler from Tzfas who stayed in our home in Baltimore many years ago, take the word Yisrael. The letters of the word Yisrael are the first letters of the patriarchs and matriarchs, all 7 of them. Yud is Yitzchak and Yaakov, Sin is Sarah, Resh is Rivka and Rachel, and the Aleph is Avraham, and the Lamed is Leah. So the nation is based on this 7-part foundation. Now in the Kabbalah, 7 is a number that's used thousands of times, and it breaks up into 3 and 4, not 5 and 2 and 6 and 1, but into 3 and 4. So the patriarchs represent the 3 qualities, and the matriarchs represent the 4 qualities, and that's a gigantic literature. But here it's not surprising at all, knowing that the patriarchs and matriarchs stand also for these fundamental qualities, that they are chosen as the representatives of 3 and 4. 5 is the 5 books of the Chumash, and that is, again, that's the book which is the foundation of Judaism, and it's broken into 5 pieces. Yes, each piece has its own theme and contributes to a set of 5 themes, all of which then tell a complete story, an interacting story. So it's the same message again, that you have pieces which have different character but are meant to be understood as an integrated whole. That's a fundamental idea. Okay. Same thing with the 6 orders of the Mishnah. Also, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who gathered together the Jewish legal material at his time, he and his court, People sometimes mention it as if he did it on his own. It's not true. He had a whole court that he did it together with, a whole community of rabbis. And he divided it into six orders, because each order has its own subject, but the six are chosen so that they form a whole, and they're placed in an order. That's a progressive order. All of that has to be understood. 7 days of the week. You think, okay, I guess the week has 7 days, and I'm like, why is that so important? Does this reflect any other deeper theme? You bet it does. The week is 6 days plus Shabbos. Shabbos is the seventh day of the week. That's, I would say, a matter of definition. The word Shabbos in Hebrew means not to sit and not to rest and not to dwell. Shabbos in Hebrew means to cease doing something. Listen to the news, you'll find out that there's a shvita going on. Shvita is the way in modern Hebrew you say a strike, which assumes they were working beforehand, which is not always true. So that's why, for example, the Christian calendar, which starts the week with Sunday, if Sunday is supposed to be the Shabbos of the Bible, it's incongruous. You cannot begin a process by stopping. You can only end the process by stopping. So that means built into the very nature of time is a 6+1 framework that repeats endlessly until this stage of history is over, and that was instituted by divine activity. And for this first 6 days, he brought, listen carefully, new categories of entities into existence day by day, and on the seventh day, he stopped bringing into existence new categories of entities, which leaves open the possibility that he was renewing the existence of all of them all the time thereafter. I'm quoting Maimonides in the guide now. And it wasn't just a one-time event, but that pattern repeats, and that's why when we were told to keep the law of Shabbos, we're told that we're doing just like the Creator did when he created the universe and brought into existence new things in the physical world, day by day, physical and spiritual worlds, let's say, and on the seventh day, cease doing that. So again, it's a fundamental unit, together with the 7 elements of the Kabbalah, which are fundamental, and therefore it is something that's absolutely fundamental. Yeah.
I was just curious, what's the connection with it repeating itself in the different parts? Like it backtracks, it goes from 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1.
Oh, this is just you have to understand. This is said at the end of the Seder. At the end of the Seder, you've been sitting there for 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours. You've had 4 cups of wine. You've eaten a meal, and now let's see if you can do this by heart. Don't just read it. No. Aficionados do it by heart, right? And see if you can say it backwards and keep track. And then, of course, who can say it faster? It becomes a kind of show of survivability. Yeah. 8. The 8 days of circumcision. Now, circumcision is a fundamental mitzvah. What about the 8 days? Is that so fundamental? Would you attach the number 8 to the 8 days? I'm telling you something, everything I've told you up until now is in all the sources. What I'm telling you now is my own idea. I think it's certainly true, and it may be part of the reason why it's so prominent here. Let's say a child is born at noon on Tuesday. When is bris milah going to take place? Assuming he's healthy and it's happened at the normal time, it'll be noon next Tuesday. I'm sorry?
It's not 24 hours, it could be in the morning also.
I know. It could be in the morning also. But okay, I don't mind that. Right? Is it from noon to Tuesday, from noon to the next Tuesday? Okay, now let's just make a little calculation. How old is he at noon on the second Tuesday? let's figure it out. He's born noon on Tuesday, so at noon on Wednesday he's 1 day old. And noon on Thursday he's 2 days old. Friday, 3 days old. Shabbos he's 4 days old. Sunday he's 5 days old. Monday he's 6 days old. And Tuesday he's 7 days old, right? If 24 hours have to go by until you're that number, that day old, right? So when he is circumcised, he's 7 days old. So what is the 8 days of circumcision? What is that? The answer is, the Torah's phraseology is, Ben Shmones Yomim. Ben Shmones Yomim means a son of 8 days. Not 8 days old, but a son of 8 days, meaning he's been alive on 8 separate days. Because he was born on the first Tuesday, and he was alive on that Tuesday. And on the Wednesday, and the Thursday, and Friday, and Shabbos, and Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Right? So, Ben Shmones Yomim means 7 days old. Now, the question will be, how do we calculate the relevant time period for a mitzvah? Do I calculate it by the number of days upon which the person or the thing existed? Or do I calculate it by how old he is? For example, you become an adult on your 13th birthday. On your 13th birthday, how many years are you old? Think carefully. Forget 13. Your first birthday. How old are you? 1 year old. Because the birthday is back to the same day you started on. So if you'll talk about being a child of days, it'll be a year plus a day, 366 days. But how old you are is 365 days. So yes, your becoming an adult depends upon how old you are, not how many days you were on. And now, bris milah could have been said the same way also. It could have been said 7 days old. No, it isn't said that way. It said that it's a child of 8 days, which I think means what you have here is a melding of 7 and 8. Because really the child is 7 days old. And how old you are is important. It's not insignificant. And how old you are is the extra day. And here, you're counting the extra day rather than how old you are. And the message, I think, is this. Because 7 describes the way our world works within the normal, repetitive, divine providence called nature. Yes, I said that exactly as I meant it. Nature is also divine providence. God doesn't go on vacation. And 7 is the measure of the normal, repetitive, divine providence, which we call nature. But we have to understand that beyond that 7, there's an 8. And there's interaction between the 8 and the 7. And sometimes the 8 breaks into the 7. And bris milah is a time when that happens. Like miracles, open miracles, generally that happens. And bris milah is a time when that happens. Now that's something just to keep in your memory bank, and maybe sometime will be a bris milah. Someone will explain it in more detail. I think that's one way to explain why the 8 days of circumcision are so important. Not just because circumcision is a very important mitzvah and because it led to the exodus from Egypt, as those who have been there know, but because of that.
Is there a significance to in rabbinic Hebrew, whenever it wants to refer to years, let's say a bar mitzvah, it always calls it 13 and 1 day? It always refers to the extra day?
Who does? What does?
The Mishnah.
Oh, the Mishnah.
In Hebrew, it always adds the extra day.
Yeah, but I guess because it's thinking of like but that's right, now, here's something else. Tisha miyodea, Tishi yemei yarche leda. 9 months for giving birth. 9 months of gestation. Of course, that's a fundamental biological fact which we all are indebted to. But the exodus from Egypt is described in a verse and elaborated in the rabbinic tradition as a process of birth. It's described as goy mikerav goy, one nation from the midst of another nation. And the picture of birth here is, I would say, poignant and a bit shocking, because the fetus, while in utero, gets all of its nourishment from its mother. We are pictured as being within the Egyptian nation, getting our sustenance from Egypt. That's a dramatic, challenging picture. What? The descendants of the patriarchs and the matriarchs are being sustained through Egypt? And yet, the verse says, God took us out as if we were swallowed up and totally submerged in that environment, and took us out anyway. This is the famous midrash which appears twice when God is punishing the Egyptians and saving the Jews, and the angels say to God, why are you punishing these and saving those? They both serve idols. The vast majority of the Jewish people in Egypt served idols. Because they were absorbed into the culture. The commentaries say that the plagues, the purpose of the plagues was not just to break the power of the Egyptians. Had that been the purpose, God would have started with the death of the firstborn and then gone out right away. No, it was an educational process, and it was an educational process. Yes, it was for the Egyptians also. The verses say that explicitly. But it was an educational process for the Jews also, who had lost their way. They'd lost their identity. They were being nourished by that foreign, polluted environment. So bringing out the idea of birth here is a way of referencing the drastic condition that they were under. And I will add that some commentators point out that this image functions even today. We are told that each nation has a higher power, an angelic power, which mediates the divine influence for that nation. So it represents that nation on high and receives it and distributes it to the nation. That's the way God set it up. The Jewish people in Israel doesn't have that intermediary. What about a Jew in New York? He gets his spiritual energy from the American intermediary. The one in Johannesburg gets it from the South African intermediary. That's one of the many penalties of living outside the land of Israel. I remember that you heard this at the anti-Zionist yeshiva called Ohr Somayach. So that position of being embedded in that foreign context, it really is a foreign context. It means the struggle to keep yourself spiritually afloat is much more difficult. Not only is it much more difficult, but it is destined to be incomplete. You're not going to be able to complete it outside the land of Israel. So God took us out of that kind of condition, which of course means that He put us in that condition for a purpose, but then when we would have had no means whatsoever on our own to rescue ourselves from that condition, He took us out of that condition. That's one of the things that the reference to pregnancy leads us to here. Okay, with 10 is the 10 pronouncements at Sinai. Now, the tradition identifies in the first chapter of Genesis also 10 pronouncements. So there's a link between the creation of the world and the giving of the Torah at Sinai. In a certain way, Josh will all talk about this, a certain way, a purpose of the creation was that God's presence should be represented on the earth. And that really took place it took place when God revealed Himself at Sinai, and it became permanent when we built the tabernacle, which, as the Ramban says, was to create a portable Sinai with us, so that the reality of Sinai could be moved with us from place to place and eventually installed in Yerushalayim. And that's why Mount Sinai is nothing to us. There's no significance whatsoever. The greatest event in human history and Jewish history took place on that mountain, and it's nothing. Zero. I saw where Rashi sat, on the seat on which he sat, the table at which he worked. That's a breathtaking place. And Mount Sinai is nothing. The answer is because Mount Sinai is a pile of stones. It's only the spirit of what happened there that would be impressive, and that spirit traveled with us. We took it with us, so it's not there anymore. So we have to understand the 10 pronouncements at Sinai represent the fulfillment of the purpose of creation, and our exodus was for the purpose of receiving the pronouncements at Sinai. So said God to Moses at the burning bush, as Rashi quotes it, that I'm taking them out because they'll serve me on this mountain. They'll receive the Torah on this mountain, receive the 10 pronouncements. So that's why it's mentioned here. It's absolutely central. Now there are 11. 11 stars. There's 11 important stars. By the way, the word star in Hebrew refers to planets also. A star a planet in Hebrew is a kochav lechet. It's a star which moves. It moves around the background sky, whereas the other stars, to our eye anyway, don't move. Now, I'll just say a word here because I have time and I certainly I'm not competent to fulfill it directly, but the stars aren't just there for contemplation, to look at. They are vehicles that carry God's providence into the world. So those people who think that the stars are active and play a role in running the world, they're right. All the systems of astrology have the wrong system. So they aren't telling you what it really means. But the idea that they're based on is not a false idea, it's just that they don't have the right system. I don't know if anybody out there is still hung up on horoscopes and that sort of thing, but if you are into that foolish game, let me just give you something to look up. The study was done 20 or 30 years ago. They sent out horoscopes to people and did a survey. How many people found that the qualities attached to their dates are qualities that they have? And it was quite significant. It was 70%, 80%, it was quite significant. And then they did another study. They took horoscopes and mixed up the qualities randomly from date to date. And they sent them out to people and asked how many people found that the qualities on the dates in this new random horoscope matched the qualities that they have. It was the same number. So it's not the reality of the horoscope. It's the subjectivity of, number one, people who answer the survey. That's always a big factor in evaluating surveys, who chose to answer. No one was forced to answer. And what giving the survey does to the person, which influences the answer. That's something that you should be aware of. But again, so the stars are not trivial. And then you have the 12 tribes. Now, this is another instance of the theme that I told you, absolutely crucial. The people is divided into 12 tribes. They're really different. Not just different, let's say, sociologically and economically. The Arizal said that originally each tribe had its own prayer book, its own order of prayer. Because in the order of prayer, at least in some places, you express your identity, and there's a different identity for each tribe. When you have Yisachar and Zvulun, one tribe is merchants, and the other tribe is the highest level of scholars, and they had an agreement that the merchant tribe would provide physical sustenance for both, so that the scholar tribe could learn, and the merit of the scholarship is divided between them. Even though the merchants, although they did invest some time in scholarship, it wasn't anything like the investment of the scholar tribe, but still, it was, and it was celebrated so. And the verse puts the merchant tribe first, as to say, because they're the ones who create the ability of the others to do what they do. So we have to understand that it functions as a unit of an integrated unity of 12 parts. And like everything else in the Jewish tradition, nothing is simple, because really there are 13 tribes. Only for certain purposes you count these 12, and for other purposes you count these 12. Whether Yosef is divided into Ephraim and Manasseh, or is counted as one, just as Yosef, whether you count Levi or you don't count Levi, they correspond to one another. If you count Levi, then Yosef is one. If you don't count Levi, then Yosef is two, Ephraim and Manasseh. So it's really 13, but it's only 12 in operation at any one time. And that's an example of how you get a Jewish 12. Yeah.
Baker's 12.
Baker's dozen, yeah.
So I think I have a faint sense of this, but I'm wondering, why did Hashem specifically have to use another nation with which to bring devotion and understanding of Him to the Jewish people? He could have sent natural disasters or something, and then He wouldn't have had to have punished a whole nation of people and then generated suffering in the process of bringing us closer to Him.
Okay, let's be careful with the vocabulary now. It isn't as if God caused the Egyptians to oppress us.
Mm-hmm.
That being the case, since what they did with their own free will, they're responsible for what they did. And having an opportunity to exercise your free will is what having free will is about. So this must have been the right circumstance to test their free will on for the sake of their own achievement. And I imagine that there were some who did and some who didn't, and not everybody was treated the same way. So I think that we don't have to worry about justice to the Egyptians. Now, it wasn't just a question of learning lessons. There was a certain residue of impurity left from the transgression of Adam and Chava in the Garden of Eden. That residue had to be expunged in order to prepare us to go out to receive the Torah. So the experience in Egypt, although it could have varied in certain ways, but the experience in Egypt was designed to expunge certain negative elements in ourselves. Not just that they should teach us, or we should be taught through what happens to them, but the period of slavery was to expunge certain elements in ourselves.
Do you have a sense of why tyranny was, what it was that needed to be expunged, and why tyranny was necessary for that?
Well, I can only say this. I can say one part of it, and that is we have in the Torah, I don't know how many times it said, 15 times, remember you were slaves in Egypt. So part of it is to teach us how to behave towards one another. Part of it is to teach us how to treat people who graft onto us. Even Egyptians in the future, we have to have a special regard for them. Positive regard, because they took us in when we needed a place to stay. And that, and this is said explicitly, you know what it's like to be a slave. So you know what I'm asking you to be to me. This is what I want from you. It's not polite to talk about this in current Western society, but God is, we are slaves to God. The word inevit, which is translated politely in your English as servant, and you think, okay, yeah, I can be a servant. If it translated as slave, you'd feel it as a slap in the face. That's because you don't know what it means to be a slave. You don't know what it connotes. I'll just say a couple of words on this. I want you to imagine the following thing. George is an aspiring painter. He's living in 1930. And he's looking for opportunities, and he went to art school, and he's reasonably talented. And he sees an advertisement in the newspaper. Picasso is looking for an assistant. Someone to set up his easel and wash his brushes. Picasso. And to sweeten the deal, Picasso says, you can watch me paint. And when you, my assistant, paint, I'll give you some comments and, instruction how to improve. George, with stars in his eyes, sends in his application, and every night he rubs his magic amulet, and he gives money to charity, and he's chosen. He's chosen. A year with Picasso. Now Picasso says, okay, you're coming to be my assistant. It's 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. That's how you work with me. You wash the brushes, and you mix the paints, and you set up the easel, and you set up the lights, and when we move from place to place, you pack the things. You have 1 hour a day to paint on your own, and that's it. That's the deal. You think he would say, oh no, 6 to 8 is too much. I'm striking until I get it to be 8 to 8. No, I'm not willing to work for that. Really? A year with Picasso? You're not willing? I think if the payoff is big enough, you'd be willing to do exactly what you were told. Exactly. Without any deviations. Without any sense of my independence. Or let me give you another example. This actually happened about 6 months ago. I remember it from 20 years ago. 2 people are up in a plane, the pilot and the passenger. And the pilot drops dead. In the air! And the passenger doesn't know how to fly. Well, the radio's on to the tower, and he says, help! The pilot just dropped dead. What am I going to do? And they say, we'll talk you down. There's another wheel next to you. There are the things on the floor next to you. It's a 2-person plane. We'll talk you down. This has been done. Now they say, you see the gadget on the upper right? Pull it down a little bit, turn a little bit to the left, push the thing on the floor. You think at a certain point he's going to say, I need time off. You're pushing me too hard. It's not fair to work for 2 hours straight. I'm taking a coffee break. Call me back. I don't think he's going to say that. But he has no independence. He's being given orders. He's doing what he has to do what he's told. That's right. If he wants to land the plane and live, then he's going to do what he's told. If not. It's like, that's the price of it. Is slavery really so abhorrent, so irrational, so immoral, such a tragedy? Really? Try playing the violin in an orchestra sometime. I'm speaking as someone who played classical music hundreds of times. The violinist has the notes on the page. He's got to play the note. The concertmaster, who's the first violinist, will tell him which string to use. Some notes can be played on different strings. No, you play it on this string, because I say so. And now vibrato. Yes, you shake your foot, and then it gives a vibrato. Just this much vibrato. And just this much pressure of the bow on the string. He's a robot. He's being told exactly what, by up bow or down bow. No, I'll tell you which one. You don't choose that. So why doesn't he rebel? Why doesn't he assert his independence? Why doesn't he strike for more control, democratic control? Because this is how you play Beethoven. That's how. You want a democratic control? Go play in your backyard. Why should 80 people have you, it's 81, to play Beethoven? You're not going to make the best possible Beethoven. So it isn't irrational, by the way. Do you take dictation when you write? Somebody tells you exactly what letter to write? Who could tell you who to write? I'll tell you who. When you're writing an email address, try changing a letter. Any letter. Won't get there. It's got to be exactly the way you're told to do it. Otherwise, it doesn't get there. Too bad. So the idea of being an inevit depends upon what you're an inevit to. What are you serving? Is it worth it? And now the message is that vis-a-vis the creator of the universe, if you're given an opportunity to be a partner in perfecting the creation, it's worth it. So I think that's what we had to learn. We had to learn the idea that the position of inevit is, what it means to be an inevit, and then to freely commit ourselves to that. In a certain sense, God could say, you know what I'm asking you to do. I'm not pulling the wool over your eyes. I'm asking you to be to me even more than what you were to the Egyptians. I'm taking you, I freed you from slavery in order to induct you into that kind of relationship with me. Okay, boy, this will take this long. That's 12. And then 13 are the 13 attributes of God. Now, God has lots of attributes, and they're collected in different ways, but these are what are called the 13 attributes of mercy. And I would just want to make a mention as a footnote for those who, because I discovered it fairly recently. This phrase, 13 attributes of mercy, isn't universal. The Rambam doesn't use it, and indeed, in the Rambam's usage, there are 12 attributes of mercy and 1 of justice. Not 13 of mercy. So he says in the guide. But it is the common element that we hear. And these are the 13 attributes with which God runs the world to get to the most complete expression of loving kindness possible. Mercy itself is a kind of guarantee of loving kindness. That's a long story that I'm not going to go into at the moment. But it's a way to get to the most perfect expression of loving kindness possible. So here, this now relates to what we all rely on. Well, I don't know about you. Maybe you're a perfect tzaddik and you can claim your place in the world to come on the basis of justice. But for me and a lot of other people, we're all relying on mercy. And that's why it's central. It's really central everywhere, and it's essential here as well. And I want to mention one footnote here also. We have this, God reveals this to Moses after the golden calf. When the Jews, you have 13 acts of mercy. The last one of it is v'nakei, God cleanses. Lo yinakeh. Then it says poket avon avos al banim al banim al shileshim haribeim the Sinai. God visits the sins of the parents on the second, third, and fourth generations for those who hate him, etc., etc. That's already beyond the attributes of mercy. Now, after the sin of the spies, when God says to Moses, I'm going to punish them, and Moses asks for mercy, and he repeats a précis. Not all of the 13, doesn't repeat all of the 13, repeats some of them. Some of the 13 attributes of mercy, but he adds the end, visiting the sins of the parents on the second, third, and fourth generations. So it struck me many years ago, why, if Moses is asking for mercy, would he add that part to it? That's not mercy, that's justice. That's strict accountability. Until I realized the question is a foolish question. What was God promising to do that Moses had to argue against? He was promising to wipe them all out on the spot. This phrase that I'm going to visit the sins of the parents on the second, third, and fourth generations means there will be second, third, and fourth generations. So asking for that in the context of a threat to wipe them all out is asking for mercy. So it becomes an attribute of mercy under those conditions. I think that's just the plain shot of what's going on there. Okay, that's the count. Then comes Hagaddah. This is an Aramaic poem. One kid, that is to say, a young goat, that Abba bought for 2 zuzim, 2 coins. One kid. Now watch. The cat came and devoured the kid. The dog came and bit the cat. Stick came and beat the dog. Fire came and burned the stick. Water came and quenched the fire. An ox drank the water. A slaughterer slaughtered the ox. The angel of death came and killed the slaughterer. The Holy One, blessed be He, killed the angel of death. What's going on here? Okay, let's see, with a little imagination. This is good for you, right? What is the kid that was bought for 2 coins?
It's the Jewish people.
The Jewish people. The 2 coins are?
The wealth of Egypt.
No.
2 buchos.
The 2 tablets. The 2 tablets we sang about in Sinai Youre, right? You bought for 2, right? So we are the original, and Father is Hakadosh Baruch Hu, who bought us for two, right? Now, the cat came and devoured the kid. So you'll say, wait a minute, devoured? But isn't that a little strong? We aren't devoured. We certainly do exist. But I will refer you back to page.
Yaakov has been devoured.
Good for you. That's exactly right. Let me find it here. It's after Hollow. Just can't turn the pages carefully enough. No, it's before. I'm sorry, before Hollow.
This one refers to the temple.
Yeah, no. That's right. It's on page 63, where it says, "Pour your wrath upon the nations that do not recognize you, upon the kingdom do not, for they have devoured Jacob." So devoured doesn't mean without remainder. It means they've attacked and injured and sometimes caused death and so forth and so on. So here too, it's fair to say that devoured doesn't mean more than that. It means, but it does mean attack. So this, we are subject to attack. And we are subject to loss. We are subject to damage and loss, and destruction. That does happen to us. And then you have the sequence. Oh man, I can open the pages here. There we go. So, the one who attacks us, and the dog comes and bites the cat. That's what we're asking for in Shmuel Chavatzcha. We ask that these people who attacked us and injured us, they should get their comeuppance. And now it's a string of comeuppances, right? Each one, meaning that the destruction itself has to be addressed and attacked. This is, the theme here. Destruction can be used, but destruction isn't an end. Destruction is only a means. And therefore, destruction has to be overcome. And at each point, the fire, the water, the ox, slaughter, angel of death. Now, the angel of death? The angel of death? Wow. The angel of death is something that's created by God. It's something that does what God wants to be done. Death is part of our world. And then God kills the angel of death. So as a matter of fact, there's a Zohar that says that explicitly. The Zohar in Parashat Shoftim says that the angel of death, God will inflict upon the angel of death all 4 misos besdin, all of the 4 ways in which a Jewish court commits capital punishment. All 4 of them will be applied to the angel of death. My oldest son, from whom I've learned a lot, let's put it that way, points out that destruction, when used positively, is always a matter of withholding. It's withholding support, withholding sustenance, withholding ability to function. God's dynamic works either by giving good or withholding good. The disintegration of something, when you withhold good, is something which is built into it. It's not something that God imposes upon it. Now, so if you have something that's destructive, which is in essence a withholding, a filtering, a holding back, there are 2 ways in principle which you could overcome it. Let's imagine you have a dam holding back a flow of water, right? So one way you can overcome the dam is by blowing up the dam. The other is by causing a much, much greater volume of water to press against the dam, and then the water will just simply overwhelm the dam and will flow. One way is applying destruction to destruction, applying withholding to withholding, and the other is overwhelming withholding with giving. You can talk about fighting evil with evil versus overwhelming evil with good. The verses in the Tanakh describe God as destroying evil with destruction. God is a warrior coming from the battles. That means the end of withholding and destruction is to turn it against itself. Like the picture of someone sawing the branch of the tree on which he's sitting. No one punishes him when he falls. He sawed off the branch he was sitting on. Or the picture of the dog chasing its own tail. What's it going to do? Eat its own tail? Will it receive nourishment from that? Will it be better off from that? Haksil ochel es psaro. King Solomon says, the fool eats his own flesh. So the inner picture is not that evil is overwhelmed with good, but that evil consumes itself and thereby ceases to exist. So, although it says here that HaKadosh Baruch Hu kills, it doesn't explain how or why. The why is because the force of evil has no ultimate place in the world to come. If you look carefully at Maimonides' commentary in the book of Job, I think you can see this. I had to do a little work to sort of squeeze it out, but I think you can see this. If you tell me that the purpose of the angel, the evil inclination, which is the angel of death, they're both the same thing. If you tell me its purpose is for free will, okay, I hear that. And you tell me, well, free will is very important, isn't it? Yes, free will is very important. But notice that in the world to come, there's no free will. So that means, yes, free will is very important as a means. Because if it were important and valuable as an end, it would be in the world to come also. And it isn't. So if the Sultan's purpose is to make possible free will, he too is only a means, not an end. And that's one way to explain why he disappears, because he's not part of the end. He's not part of the end. He's only part of the apparatus which enables us to achieve a certain state of being which makes us appropriate for the end. And then that apparatus is discarded. So that's one way to see the ultimate reason why the angel of death won't be there. At any rate, this is just an idea. Now, this is a challenge. At the end of your Seder, first of all, to be awake enough to say these things and not get confused. And second of all, to try to think about each one. Think about each one. You've been focusing on a certain set of ideas, which is fairly circumscribed the whole night. Now let your mind and let your heart expand and like a shooting star. Expand in different directions to encompass a much, much broader perspective. Okay.